Okay, welcome back to the Inward Markings Company vlog. I've just been doing some on-location filming, funnily enough, and you'll see that in this episode. This is chapter 15 of the Daily-ish vlog. You need to watch the first 14 chapters on the YouTube channel, which you can access via inwardmarkings.com. The Instagram is @inwardmarkings. Thank you to anyone who's even watched a minute of this. But yeah, you need to watch the first 14 to make sense of this chapter and successive chapters. So what I've spoken about is my arrival back in Melbourne and the significant change that occurred upon landing. So yeah, literally everything changed upon landing back in Melbourne. But the reason why I think about a destined process, or a big part of that, is not just like the events that have occurred since my arrival back, but the change could not have affected me so much. It could not have had the profound ongoing impact that it has if I had not had such contrast prior to that. So to have something lifted from me so immensely, I needed to have a protracted experience of ongoing challenges and continual kind of I guess a continual presence within me in the form of cravings and certain emotions that are tied into my behaviours, but more so the cravings. It was just these really intensive cravings that would continue over a lengthy period of time. And to have that weight lifted from me so suddenly, and for the contrast to be so marked, that alone has been enough to just completely change my life. But to the point where I do say everything has changed. But then the events that followed just reaffirmed it in an immense way as well. So it's the combination of those things. But just to make it clear, that's why that's a big part of why I'm talking about destined process, because I needed to undergo the contrast and the sudden shift would not have been possible without what I'd gone through prior to the shift occurring. So you'll see that I occasionally spit. That's not what I'm like in person. It's anyway. What you will see now, though, before I get into what I now understand has been continual synchronicity that's intensified over time in the kind of 22 months leading up to the launch of the brand, is the serendipitous occurrences that occurred gradually over time throughout my life previously, that, like anyone, I just kind of wrote off as, that was an interesting coincidence or co-occurrence or whatever. But now I'm reassessing it all, and I realized that it's been kind of like a winks from the universe, if you like, or a nod from something greater, that to show me kind of where things would lead eventually. And obviously I had no idea that my life would turn out the way that it did and has. But yeah, there's too much, and the nature of the occurrences as well, in terms of the timing. And what I've also come to realize is that the people that I've realized over time that the people that I've met have not, that's not the essence of why I've had those serendipitous meetings or the synchronicities. I think it's about showing me, I guess, the influence of the universe, but also there's a theme that runs through all of them, like creativity. Drugs are a consistent theme, but mostly it's just about creativity. And given the premonitionary dream that I've spoken about and that I'll talk about in a later chapter, that has a strong resonance. So I initially had been thinking, okay, there's something particular about all these people, and gave them too much meaning in terms of those specific individuals. But I think it's more about Wings from the Universe, but also the theme of creativity and the importance of creativity. And I guess there's aspects within that as well, like street culture, femininity, feminism, social justice, if you like. That term's kind of, I guess, I think it's still meaningful. But yeah, I guess that's something I'll talk about more later as I process it more. But yeah, I've now realised that it's not because I'm not running into specific individuals because I need to do something specifically with that individual, which is what occurred to me initially. Like, is there a reason that I'm meeting these particular individuals? But yeah, I think there's something greater, and part of that significance, as I talk about in the clips that you'll see, is that I don't just see individuals that I know of, but they are particularly relevant to me. So I will be a fan of them, or I will have had some kind of exposure to their work, but also the timing of it. So I will have met them subsequent to a time where I was taken by something that they did. So I think that's about it. It's challenging to speak about because I can't draw a very clear conclusion about it, and there's so much that all of us don't know. So yeah, this is just to give you guys some background into what then occurred leading up to the launch of the brand. So given sort of the stuff that I've talked about from my life previously, and then if you can insert these kind of events during that timeline, and then hopefully that will give you a kind of basis from which I have been able to reassess things for the chapters that come after this. So yeah, here are the clips. Okay, so I came out to check the mail, and Kwan Yearman from Regurgitate was walking down there with someone else, and he stopped about right there at the same time that I arrived, exactly the same time, to collect the mail. This is in an area called Richmond, which is in the inner north of Melbourne, and it didn't just occur at any time. It was just after I'd been reading about the success that they had with their album Unit, which was massive and kind of unprecedented in Australia because they came from that indie scene, small band, independent labels, playing small shows, and then just broke through in a huge way. And they even sold out big stadium style tours throughout the country. And this documentary that I heard, I'm pretty sure it was on Triple J, the radio station, talked about how much financial success they had from those national tours. It was huge, and they won all these ARIA awards, and I just remember reading about all of that stuff, and then that occurred. So I obviously just wrote it off as just a nice coincidence. But as I've explained, serendipitous events have gradually built up, and I've realised that there's been that it's been part of a process of understanding the meaning of synchronicity. Okay, there's that. And so this is about 400 meters from where I saw the guy from Regurgitator. And here I crossed paths at the exact time with Rove McManus, who, if you don't know him, is an Australian comedian, entertainer type guy. And he was jogging or something like that, and I had no idea that obviously he was going to be doing that. But what was interesting is that I'd just been reading about him in the period beforehand, because of the passing of his wife at that time, and it was really tragic, and something that I was kind of particularly taken by it, just because of the nature of the way it happened and his kind of response afterward and the resilience, I guess. But yeah, I'm not going to go into detail about it. But yeah, so yeah, this is where I ran into Rove McManus. So there's that. So this is around the corner, about 500 meters from where I saw Rove McManus, and then about a K from where I saw Quan. And just behind me, without getting people in to the camera, because I fucking hate that, I saw the guitarist from Jebediah. His name's Christopher Damon. And the thing about that was I'd just been really getting into their second album, Court of Someday Shambles, and then rediscovering, or discovering as well, their first album before that. So yeah, it didn't happen just at any time. It happened at a particular time. So there's that. Okay, see ya. And I ran into John Toogood, the lead singer guitarist of a band called She Had, around about there when there used to be a festival on this street, the Brunswick Street Festival. And it wasn't just at any time, like with the other occasions. It was just after the video for My Mind Sedate had been released from the album General Electric, and I was really taken by that video and the song, and yeah, it was very timely. So there was that. So this is where I had my second serendipitous encounter with Rayan, who is the bassist from a band called the Hard-Ons. He was sitting here with Pete Kostic, actually, who's the drummer of Regurgitator and was also in this band Front End Loader, if I'm not mistaken. Is he also in Hard-Ons? Who knows? And so I had one previous and then one subsequent regarding Rayan. But it wasn't just at any time. The Triple J show called The J Files had just recently, or in the time period before that, featured the Hard-Ons. And then I went back upstairs, and a fellow staff member had a personal connection with Rayan as well, so there was something serendipitous about it. And this here, which is kind of just 500 meters back from where I saw Rayan, is where I saw Aaron Pedersen, the Aboriginal long-time actor, highly regarded. And I can't recall what I'd seen Aaron Pedersen like previous to seeing him here. It was such a hot day, and it was extraordinary because he was walking along with two of his friends who were not famous people or anything like that, but they were having some kind of argument. But Aaron Pedersen was he just kept being himself and still being respectful and treating his friends as friends, or it was only one of the friends that he was having the argument with, and just not giving a flying fuck about what anyone else thought. It was like, this is our business, we're discussing it while we're walking, and I don't give a fuck if I'm, famous in your eyes. It was really cool. It was such a hot day. Those hot days in Fitzroy are amazing. They bring back memories. So there was that. And so right there is where I had a serendipitous encounter with Luke Steele, who is from the band Sleepy Jackson and Empire of the Sun. It was a serendipitous encounter that occurred. I can't remember if it was after the release of Lovers, which I really got into, or the second album. But it certainly did not just occur at any time. It happened after I'd been listening to their album quite intensively and just like marveling at the songwriting, and read an interview in which he talked about like living in inner city Perth and like considering his like apartment that he lived alone in as kind of his lab that he kind of just created stuff in. I think it was like he made comparisons to Walt Disney or something like that. But yeah, there's that. I emerged from that elevator at the exact same time that Greg Fleet, the comedian, emerged from the second elevator. That was at a time when you could readily access this lobby, I guess, area of these Commission housing flats in the inner north of Melbourne. And it was amazing. We literally emerged at exactly the same time. And what was interesting about the timing is that Greg Fleet had recently done the comedy show 10 Years in a Long Sleeve Shirt, in which he talks candidly about his injecting heroin use. And so yeah, there was that, the timing. So right at that intersection right there is where I was parked. Well, the car I was in was parked. I was in the front passenger seat, and I looked to my right, and that exact moment another car pulled up about 2-3 lanes across to the furthest lane away, and Guy Pearce was in the seat of that car, passenger seat of that car. I must have been driving to be on the same side as him when in the passenger seat, and it wasn't just any time. I'd really been into the film Memento that he's in, the Christopher Nolan film, and that film is phenomenal, and to this day it's probably one of my all-time preferred. It's an incredibly crafted film, and yeah. You know what's funny about this spot as well? See that big wheel there? This is near the Docklands of Melbourne. About 6 months ago, I found this like photo processing like voucher or something along one of my walks, and just it's a large thing, and I'd never seen anything like it before, and just has this thing up, you know, go to this website and retrieve your photos. And you know, obviously it wasn't. Who was I going to hand it into? And so I went and retrieved the photos, and there was just like 6 photos of just 2 women, I think 2 older East Asian women, standing in front of that fucking wheel. And so I just thought, because it was during a time when you know, signs and synchronicities, etc., were really potent, and I thought that wheel is somehow important to me, but I didn't know how. I'd never felt compelled to come down here or to ride it. I don't know, I still don't, but I only retrieved the memory of like seeing Guy Pearce here maybe a month ago or so, and then forgot about it, and then in the last couple of days, or even maybe in the last day, it was like, oh yeah, I should go down and do that. And what do you know, the wheel, this is at the base of the wheel. It's like the universe is like, that area is going to be, you need to remember that area. So yeah, it's right at the base of it. And I just want to say, see this sign here? I don't know if you can see it in relation to the other sign, but it's one of these cute mini street signs that I really like. There's even one smaller than this, where it's just like literally like there, and they look like little like baby versions of street signs. They're really cute. I like them, but they're rare to see. There's one in St Kilda, but yeah, keep an eye out for them. And there's ones also that are really close to the ground. They're like the yeah, I don't know, they're like the mini me of street signs. They look really cute. Anyway, see ya. And this is where I cross paths at the exact moment after turning the corner with Tim Rogers, who fronts a band called You Am I, but also does solo work. And the strange thing about that is the timing of it. I'd only been recently listening to his solo album that just been released called Spit Polish. I ended up writing a review for it. I really love that album. Haven't listened to it in a long time. But what was weird is that a lot of these encounters, just like the Geoffrey Rush one that I'll talk about later. Well, I've talked about it in the previous chapter, but I'll actually go to the location. Is that it was just eerily just totally quiet. I think it was the middle of the day or mid-afternoon on a weekday, so it makes sense, but just something about these encounters where there's just fucking nothing or nobody around. Anyway, so you've got that. Okay, so somewhere along here used to be an Angus and Robson bookshop where I appeared at the counter at the exact time Will Anderson, the comedian, was buying a book. But it wasn't just end time, it was that time when I was really into his daily morning show, radio show with this guy Adam Spencer on a station called Triple J.
That would be one of three in terms of Will Anderson, but yeah, so that's a long time ago, but there's that. So down there on that corner, this one, the smaller streets leading onto Elizabeth Street, is where I approached the intersection at the exact same time that the comedian Tim Ferguson from the Doug Anthony All-Stars was approaching the corner with a friend. It was at a particular time because I can't remember if it was around the time of his MS diagnosis and it was being made public, but there was but he had been a point of discussion with my brother because my brother had like an abrasive interaction with him in public, and it would come up at my brother's initiation, of course. Okay. And then somewhere along this stretch of Swanston Street is where I turned the corner, and Paul McDermott, also from the Doug Anthony All-Stars, but later from television, was emerged from a store with, I think, his partner. And the timing of it was that, I can't remember if I was I'm pretty sure it was just after Good News Week had finished up, and I'd really enjoyed that show and watched it not infrequently. Or it could have been just like while it was going, maybe near, but I'm pretty sure it was around the end period. Anyway, so there's that. So it's along this stretch of the bridge, beautiful Yarra, that I encountered Geoffrey Rush. There was no traffic, and I'm certain that this fence was not there. But there's I guess what you'd call a prestigious girls' college just up there that I'm presuming he maybe had just dropped his daughter off or went to see her or something, or, you know, maybe he was buying shaving mirrors. I don't know. But as I've said in the previous chapter, it was an eerie encounter because there was no one around, no cars, and it was incredibly windy, and there was just something kind of sinister about his coat flapping behind him. But, you know, I'm not saying that that's indicative of his character. I'm just saying that was the vibe of the encounter. So there's that. So this is in an kind of far outer suburb of Melbourne, and this is the Country Train line that runs through it. I hope you can see it. And just one day I was living out this way and I couldn't be fucked walking all the way back home. So there is like, it's just a little bit, even though it's not worth, I'd never done it before because it's not really worth it. I decided to hop on the Country Train line. So there's two train lines that run through the area. One's Metro, one's Country. And I only ever took the Metro because the station was the closest to my house. But on this occasion, I was so worn out that I just decided to even just go to the bit further out Country station. And I'd never done it before, and I didn't do it any time afterward. And the carriage that I got on the exact same carriage and ended up sitting kind of just across from the actor, and he was on Dancing with Stars most recently, Samuel Johnson, and he's Australian. And what was interesting is that I just been talking to someone from the organisation called Open Family, and recently prior to it, and Open Family did work with Sam Johnson, but probably more significant, definitely more significant, is that I'd read stuff that had happened in Sam Johnson's life regarding his mother and his partner, both of whom are now deceased. That was just, it was a really moving article, and that Sam Johnson is so fucking resilient. It's just amazing. I've only got respect for that guy. So there's that. Okay, so this place has changed a lot over the years, but just behind me there used to be a lot more tables, and this is where I first ran into Jack Kirk. Jack Kirk's a skater who currently skates for Huddle Skateboards, but when I saw him, he was skating for a company called Slave, a US company, and he was wearing a Slave hoodie. But the funny thing was, when I walked up the escalator at the exact time that he was getting up to go with his group of friends. But yeah, That was a synchronous occasion with Jack Kirk, which would then play out later over this period leading up to the launch of the brand. So there's that. Okay, so it's along this stretch of Elizabeth Street that I would intermittently see Callum Paul, but it was just never planned. I just suddenly turn around while standing in a shop and see Callum Paul, who skates for Passport and has done for a long time, just skating down literally like a wild man. It was amazing. He just looked so free and so happy, and he just pushed so hard and never got into an accident, never got hurt, never even fell down. Just like literally roaring down Elizabeth Street on his board and flailing his arms about, his long hair waving in the wind. He just looked so free and so pleased, so psyched to be doing what he was doing and going to where he was going, wherever that was. I think maybe a couple occasions I saw him on Swanson Street, but definitely on Elizabeth Street is where I first saw him, and then would see him a number of occasions after that. But it was just uncanny. I'd turn around and there he was again, wildly riding down the street. Just amazing. So again, that kind of ties into stuff that happened during this most recent period. So there's that. Okay, so see back there on that corner, there's a station called Melbourne Central Station. I'm not going in there because it's so noisy, but that's where I ran into Bryce Golder, who used to skate for Habitat. He skates for Ruka now, does a lot of filming and photography now. And the thing was, he was coming down the escalator as I was going up, and we literally met at the exact moment on one of the levels and pretty much collided into each other. The thing was, with him, Callum and Jack, I discovered them via the internet only just in the period beforehand, and especially with Callum and Bryce, also their photography on Tumblr, which I just was so impressed by. All three are still in skateboarding, and they're just phenomenal skateboarders. So yeah, there's that. Okay, so this is the second serendipitous occasion that I had with Lewis Marnell. This is Lincoln Square. Once an incredible epicenter of Melbourne skateboarding and of globally as well. And Lewis Marnell, when I caught him here, I was just at uni and decided to come out for some fresh air. And there he was filming his part for the Almost Video 5-incher, which I highly recommend. It's on YouTube. And got a chance to actually chat with him this time. But that was the second occasion. And again, he'd been pro for quite some time. But then I moved up to Sydney, probably 18 months, maybe a bit longer after that, and turned a corner in inner city Sydney. I walk a lot, and not on main streets usually, but turned a corner at that exact moment. I saw him walking together with this filmer named Chris Middlebrook, who films for the Nike SB team in Australia. And they were just walking along a back street of Sydney talking, and I didn't bother stopping them. They were quite a way off, but it was at the exact moment that I turned the corner. I then relocated to Thailand in the period after, and at the commencement of 2013, read a headline just off by chance that he'd passed. So there was these three serendipitous occasions that occurred prior to his passing, which completely took me by surprise, and I'm sure that was the case for the skateboarding community globally. But as far as I can recall, that is all for skateboarding in terms of serendipitous occurrences in the lead up to this last period before the launch of the brand, when things just kind of went haywire in a way. So yeah, there's that. Okay, so I hope those clips give you some insight, but there's more that occurred in other parts of the country that obviously I wasn't able to be on location for, but just to fill in the gaps and just to give you guys, just try and share my perspective on it, because there has been a lot, and they've been just the nature of them. So I ran into
Stuart McLeod, who's the guitarist of this band Eskimo Joe, in Fremantle, just in this random location at a 7-Eleven, a really remote 7-Eleven, and he was actually just getting into the car as I arrived. So he was getting in the car to go as I arrived. So again, it was one of those like exact timing things. You know, a couple of seconds either way, I wouldn't have seen him. And the only reason I saw him was because he was standing as he was putting stuff into the car, so his face was visible to me. So it really was a matter of seconds. I also walked into a pub in inner city Perth at the same time that the drummer of Eskimo Joe was putting some money into a jukebox, and he played Queens of the Stone Age. And yeah, I don't know. That's kind of interesting because it was not so much the timing, but because he's also in Eskimo Joe. And then I was on the central coast of New South Wales waiting for someone to finish shopping in Woolworths, and really, like, same with the Stuart McLeod one, it was just like hardly anyone around, really quiet. And so this was at night, and I'm just sitting there, and Andrew Denton and I think one of his children emerged from the store, and I had a rave about him because I'd been a big fan of a show called The Money or the Gun, which is from a long time ago, and I'd also been watching him in Enough Rope in the period prior to that run-in. It's just, yeah, it was weird. And then I ran into this Australian actor named Damien Walsh Howling when I relocated to Sydney prior to going to Southeast Asia. And it was in the period, like, in the job that I was in prior to moving to Sydney, I'd been working with his younger brother, and never expected, and he came up in conversations, but I never expected to meet Damien Walsh Howling. And I was just walking along in inner city Sydney and looked up, and there he was walking toward a parking meter, but walking directly toward me to a parking meter kind of behind me. And yeah, I recognised him because he'd been in a newspaper article or something, and his younger brother had it with him and showed it to me. But yeah, I looked up at the exact moment that he had emerged from his car and walking to the meter, and I just chatted to him about his younger brother, and yeah, just incredibly serendipitous. And then also in Sydney, this is related to skateboarding. It was when two skaters named Sammy Winter and Chima Ferguson were living in Surrey Hills, and I ran into them skating in this area of Surrey Hills. But this was after like being at an event in Port Melbourne like 7 or 8 years beforehand, and like just standing there looking at the skating that was happening in a bowl, and just then looking over to my right, and at that exact moment Sammy Winter just walked into this gap in the crowd, and I recognised him straight away, and I said hello. And I think it's just because I said hello, but he walked straight over to me and introduced himself, because I think he thought maybe we'd met before, but no, we hadn't. I just recognised him. And so then, yeah, up in Sydney all that time later, seeing him and Chima skating, just practicing in one of the areas. But then I guess that's not such a big deal, because I mean, it connects to that early event, and you know, you run into skaters in the streets all the time. But then I happened to be walking down Oxford Street and crossed paths with him at the exact time that him and Chima were walking up sometime later, maybe a couple of months, and Sammy Winter was in a full leg cast. He'd had some kind of major injury, and he was walking on crutches as well. And Chima Ferguson was next to him, and it looked like he was trying to kind of keep him motivated because the injury was so significant. So yeah, they're just other ones that I haven't been able to film on site, obviously. And yeah, in subsequent chapters, I will speak of why I now see those as so significant. So thank you for tuning in. See ya.